Hey guys, so I got good feedback last semester from the videos, and I decided that this semester I would try to keep up as we go through the semester and do a small teaching after each class to just reiterate what I felt were important points and then go through the questions at the end of the chapter, um, discuss them, and reinforce the right answers. So, first, since we've already talked about stress and adaptation, there will be 4 questions on our first exam about these topics. So I'm going to start with stress as a biological response. Selye had a theory, and it is 3 different stages. So the first stage is called alarm reaction stage. This is basically our fight or flight response, which is normal and typically is not harmful. Then we enter the stage of resistance. This is where we are allowing our body's defenses to buy us some time to adapt to the stressor. This should be as far as Selye's theory progresses, because this is normal. This is what is expected from stressors, and just it shouldn't cause any harm. What has happened in our society is that we have chronic stress. And so this next stage occurs. It's called the stage of exhaustion. It results from prolonged exposure to the stimuli that has produced the stress. This is maladaptive. It harms the body and the integrity of the person. So at this point, we become exhausted, our resources become depleted, and we could have some of the following signs and symptoms, such as headaches, colitis, mental disorders, coronary artery disease, or ulcers. This third stage, if no adaptation is made to the stressor, then it can lead to death. So, while this adaptive response served our ancestors really well, the fight or flight in response to grizzly bears or mountain lions, any physical threat that they faced was good. In our society, we have lots of social, psychological, emotional stressors that we come into contact with. And so this fight or flight can sometimes be dangerous for us, and it doesn't actually help us fight the psychological or emotional stressors that we encounter, because they are not quickly removed from the equation. They take longer amounts of time to be removed, and therefore fight or flight is of no use. So now I'm going to talk about stress as an environmental event. They made the, relevant lifestyle, recent lifestyle change questionnaire. It was made earlier, but they updated it in 1997 to reflect more realistic lifestyle changes that are more modern. What they found is that women react at higher stress levels than men, single people react with higher stress levels than married couples, and younger people react at higher levels than older people. For individuals who score highly on the RLCQ, they are at a greater susceptibility to physical or psychological illness. They go on to say that it's unknown if the stress predisposes this person to an illness or actually is the precipitating factor, but it's definitely linked. The weakness that was pointed out with this questionnaire is that it doesn't take into account how the individual perceives the change. For example, like marriage is one of the questions on this questionnaire, and while that is a good change for most people, it can be stressful, and this questionnaire doesn't ask if you're having stress related to that. It just asks if you have been married in the last 6 months to a year. So now we're going to talk about stress as a transaction between the individual and the environment. This is Lazarus and Folkman's theory. They have the precipitating event that can be internal or external, basically just meaning it can be health related, psychological problem related, or external, like losing your job, leveling up in your job, a family member moves in with you, etc. So what happens is we do a primary appraisal. They broke down into 3 categories. We have irrelevant, benign, positive, and stressful. So irrelevant means it has no significance on your life. Benign positive means that it produces pleasure without producing extra stress. And then stressful is harm or loss, threat, and challenge. Any one of those things can cause stress. So you can have a positive event that happened in your life, such as a promotion, that you view as a challenge, so it can add stress to your life. Then if the event was labeled in the category stressful to the individual, you move into your secondary appraisal. This is where the individual will assess their skills, resources, and knowledge that they have to deal with the situation. So they're going to think about how will they cope. Is the option that they chose to cope with going to be effective? And then can this option be used in a helpful manner? They also discuss some predisposing factors to stressors. We have genetic influence, the physical, psychological, and temperament. Physical would be like health problems in your family that are genetic, passed down, heart disease, stuff like that. Psychological would be like bipolar and other psychological diseases that we have found have genetic links. And then temperament is typically a genetic thing as well. In psych, we talk a lot of nature versus nurture. So we haven't got there yet. So I don't know if temperament is nature or nurture or a little bit of both. Anyway, past experiences are also predisposing factors. These past experiences lead to learned patterns that influence the stress response of individuals. And then existing conditions like health status, current levels of motivation, developmental maturity, the severity and duration of the stressor, their financial status, educational status, resources that are available to them, their age, coping strategies that they've already learned, and if they have a support system or not. All of these factors play into how they will respond to stressors in their environment. So now we're going to talk about stress management. I'm going to try to talk about it from a nursing perspective because we're in nursing school. So we have adaptive coping strategies. First one that is discussed in the book is awareness. This is when we will teach our patients to recognize the signs that they are experiencing a stressor, and to further dive into that and recognize what causes them to become stressed so that they can avoid that or accept it and have an adequate coping strategy set up. Then we're going to move into relaxation. This is any method of reducing tension. The suggestions in the book are physical exercise, such as running, sports, jogging, weightlifting, etc., or techniques like breathing exercises or progressive relaxation. Then they talk about meditation. This is actually a foundation of most psychosocial interventions. It has been shown to reduce blood pressure and improve problem-solving engagement and reduce anxiety. So how we encourage them to do this is to assume a comfortable position, close their eyes, and think of nothing except one word, sound, or phrase that has a positive meaning to the individual. Then we move on to interpersonal communication. I would say this one is pretty common for people who like to talk about their problem. But it's found that talking the problem out with an empathetic individual can interrupt the escalation of the stress response. So just talking about it can interrupt that escalation so that we don't reach the stage of exhaustion. Writing in a journal or a diary can produce the same response by interrupting that escalation. Pets, this physical act of stroking your pet's fur is therapeutic. It can provide the individuals with a sense of warmth, affection, and interdependence. And since pets can't talk back or betray you, this is a reliable, trusting being. Then we've talked about, or the book talks about music. They use the quote to soothe the savage beast. Music has been shown to provide pain relief, improve motivation and performance, sleep, enhancing blood vessel function, reducing stress, relieving symptoms of depression, improving cognition, and easing recovery in stroke patients. And the last one we'll talk about is problem solving. This is an adaptive coping strategy that allows for objective viewing of the stressor. So we will encourage the patient to assess the facts of the situation and then come up with a goal for how we're going to resolve the stressor. We're going to talk about alternative methods to get to the goal so that there are many options to choose. We're going to determine risk versus benefit with each alternative intervention. We're going to choose one, implement this intervention, evaluate the outcome, and if it didn't work, we're going to choose another one and try again until we find something that works to remove the stressor. That is all I've got. So just remember that there are only 4 questions over this on the test. I forgot. I'm going to do the questions at the end of the chapter. There's only 6, so they shouldn't take too long. So question 1 is, Sandra, who lives in Maine, hears on the evening news that 25 people were killed in a tornado in South Texas. Sandra experiences no anxiety upon hearing of this stressful situation. What is the most likely reason that Sandra experiences no anxiety? Option A, she is selfish and does not care what happens to other people. Option B, she appraises the event as irrelevant to her own situation. C, she assesses that she has the skills to cope with the stressful situation. Or D, she uses suppression as her primary defense mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just talk this out. I would rule out A because we have no indication that she is selfish and does not care what happens to other people. I'm going to rule out D because we have not talked about primary defense mechanisms or suppression at all in this chapter. So then that leaves us with B or C being viable options. So now we just have to choose the most correct. Since we talked about, who was it? I think it's Folkman and Lazarus. Folkman and Lazarus's theory puts things into perspective as irrelevant, benign, positive, or stressful. And since she lives in Maine and this event happened in South Texas, I'm going to go with B and say that she appraises the event as irrelevant to her own situation. And it looks like I'm correct. So B is the correct answer. So question number 2. Cindy regularly develops nausea and vomiting when she is faced with a stressful situation. Which of the following is most likely a predisposing factor to this maladaptive response by Cindy? Option A, Cindy inherited her mother's nervous stomach. Option B, Cindy is fixed in a lower level of development. Option C, Cindy has never been motivated to achieve success. Option D, when Cindy was a child, her mother pampered her and kept her home from school when she was ill. So I'm going to go talk through these. So option A about the nervous stomach, I'm going to go with no. That's just no. I'm throwing it out. Option B, Cindy is fixed in a lower level of development. We have no indication of this. The question doesn't give information like that, so I'm throwing that one out as well. Option C, she's never been motivated to achieve success. That also is not something that was indicated in the question, so throwing that out as well. And that leaves option D, when Cindy was a child, her mother pampered her and kept her home from school when she was ill. Option D is most likely because if her mother fostered that, that result of her anxiety by not making her face a stressful situation, it's possible that it's something that has developed and still occurs. So let's see if I'm right. And I am, D. So, number 3, when an individual's stress response is sustained over a long period, the endocrine system involvement results in which of the following? A, option A, decreased resistance to disease. Option B, increased libido. Option D, decreased blood pressure. Or that was C, I'm sorry. Or option D, increased inflammatory response. So, option A was definitely discussed in the chapter, so that's possibly the right answer. Option B is not the answer. Stress response does not increase your libido. Option C, decreased blood pressure, is actually the opposite of what most people discuss with physiological responses to stress. And option D is also an option because of the stress hormones that are released. But I think I'm going to go with A because it was specifically discussed in our classwork. And let's see if I'm right. Oh, I am. Okay, so option A was correct. So, question number 4. Why is stress management extremely important in today's society? Option A, evolution has diminished the human capability for fight or flight responses. Option B, the stressors of today tend to be ongoing, resulting in a sustained response. Option C, we have stress disorders that did not exist in the days of our ancestors. Or option D, one never knows when one will have to face a grizzly bear or a saber-toothed tiger in today's society. So I'm throwing out option D because for the most part, we don't worry about facing grizzly bears or saber-toothed tigers. Option A, the evolution diminishing our fight or flight, I'm throwing that one out as well, because if our fight or flight was diminished, we would not go into the prolonged exhaustion period. So that leaves us with option B, the stressors being ongoing, or option C, the stress disorders that did not exist in the days of our ancestors. While option C might be correct, option B was discussed in our coursework, so I'm going to go with option B. And that is the correct answer. So, question number 5. Elena has just received a promotion on her job. She's very happy and excited about moving up in her company, but she has been experiencing anxiety since receiving the news. Her primary appraisal is that she most likely views the situation as which of the following? A, benign positive. Option B, irrelevant. Option C, challenging. Or option D, threatening. Option A is incorrect because benign positive means that it produces only pleasure and no stress response. Option B, irrelevant, would also produce no stress response, so that one is not correct either. Option C and D would produce a stress response. However, I don't think she was threatened by her promotion because it said that she was happy and excited. So I'm going to go with option C, being challenging. And that is correct. So the last question is a select all that apply. John comes into the mental health clinic with reports of anxiety and depression. According to the transactional model of stress and adaptation, which of the following are important to consider when assessing John's complaints? We have option A, John's perception of precipitating events. Option B, past stressors and degree of positive coping abilities. Option C, existing social supports. Option D, physical strength. And option E, pupillary adaptation to light. So I'm going to start at the bottom. Option E, pupillary adaptation to light, seems to have no place in this list, so I'm throwing it out. Option D, physical strength. Physical strength typically does not relate to anxiety and depression, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it out as well. Option A, John's perception of precipitating events. That was discussed in our material, so I'm going to go with that's one of them. Option B, past stressors and degree of positive coping abilities. That was discussed as well. And option C, existing social supports. We know that a support system is vital. So I'm going to go with A, B, and C being the correct answers. And it is. So that's all I have today. There's only 4 questions over this on our first exam. So I hope this helps.